Welcome back, Diva family, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Somehow, we are almost halfway through 2026, and time keeps speeding up. So, in today's interview, I'd like to invite us all to take a breath and just slow down a bit. And I've got the perfect guest for that. Samantha Sweetwater and I cannot remember what event we initially met at, but it was some local psychedelic gathering where we connected and totally clicked. And because we live in the same community, we decided to go for a hike and get to know each other better, which was totally delightful. And I wanted to have her on the podcast then, but she was busy finishing her wonderful book, True Human: Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World. So we put the interview on the back burner. Luckily, the universe intervened and we ran into each other on the hiking trail. And here we are, ready to take that deep breath and slow down the franticness for the next hour. You can read Samantha's full bio in the show notes, but here's a few highlights. Samantha has been weaving the threads of plant medicine, ceremony, deep ecology, and the sacred feminine together for over 3 decades. She's a best-selling author, executive coach, and the founder and director of One Life Circle, a plant medicine ministry. Welcome to Psychedelic Divas, Samantha.
Thank you, Carla. It's a delight to be here.
Well, I want to start with the hard parts of what's happening in our world today, and then I want to talk about how psychedelics might help shift that,
Mm.
and then I want to end on an uplifting note. So, for those listening, it might be time to take that deep breath I mentioned in the beginning.
Mm.
So, Samantha, you have talked about how we've entered the great unraveling, and that certainly feels like what's happening out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe for us what you are seeing and feeling out there in the world and within us right now?
Mm. The Great Unraveling is a term that was offered by Joanna Macy, who's one of my meta teachers, and it refers to um, what others have called the meta crisis or the poly crisis, to a moment in our evolution as a species where our technosphere and our economy and our governance systems are no longer deeply aligned with life. They're deeply misaligned with life and pulling apart the fabric of relationality. And then where the combination of our technosphere and the structures and systems of our world have really pulled apart the social space. And people were feeling lonely and alienated and polarized and often very disembodied and disconnected from a sense of meaningful agency. And I mean, I think at the center of that's what the great unraveling is. It's like really a time when you look around and young people are really looking around and saying, what's here for me? What's the future opportunity for the life that I've been given? And, so in America, it's also a constitutional crisis, a deep crisis of the foundation of our nation. That I don't think many people are talking about in public, but I think it's really helpful to look at what we're going through as a constitutional crisis, a crisis of power and of meta ethics. And it's painful and it's confusing and it can be very challenging to ground and challenging to feel what to do or who to be or how to be effective in this context. The good news is that there's foundational strategies that have always been the root strategies for being a good human, like connecting with your place and connecting with your neighbors. It's like relationship as a meta strategy, is I'm sure we'll get into that as we talk. But yes, I think of this time as an epochal moment where we are kind of sitting in this shuddering planetary crucible, the crucible being the limits of biospheric systems and also the limits of our own biology and psychology in terms of like stretching outside of the fidelity of biophysical life. AI psychosis being an instantiation of that. And it's such a juicy, challenging penultimate opportunity to re-anchor into what makes us most human.
Well, that's a beautiful overview of what we are just. Uh, I was trying to think what the verb is I want to say. Are we sailing? Are we crawling? Are we slogging through this? Like what are we? This is the energy. It's thick. It's deep. And yet here we are as souls chosen of this time. We came here for this time to be here
Mm-hmm.
for this moment. At least that's my belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is our role here? And that is certainly, Joanna Macy speaks so beautifully to that. So
Mm.
that's why I wanted to start with those words. I'm curious because I still want to just set the ground here. So you write about this moment as a planetary rite of passage,
Yes.
ecological collapse, geopolitical unraveling, existential technology, all converging at once.
Yes.
All right, so that's where we are. Now, go ahead and take another breath, y'all. And so I'm curious when you sit with people in ceremony right now, how has the weight of this moment changed what comes up or what intentions are set? Do you see a
Mm.
difference in that in ceremony?
Yeah, I think there's, whether it's conscious or unconscious, there's usually a higher level of anxiety and
Yep.
stress, and sometimes a much higher level of bargaining. Like part of why our country is really struggling with fascism is that fascism psychologically, to move into fascist structures is a way of seeking security. It's like seeking the orderly parent when chaos is present. And that's very well known in the psychology of populations in the context of fascism, that usually arises due to extreme stressors in the culture and in the economy. And so all of that shows up in ceremony. It shows up that people want the good mama and they want solutions and they want answers. And it shows up that for me, that like, what is it to be a good mother in the context of a moment where I can't guarantee security? And that's really actually matured me as a facilitator because my nervous system couldn't model everything's going to be okay and be in integrity, especially in a psychedelic state. And so the opportunity then is to say, well, what is this next step of maturation where we are capable of being responsive to the conditions that we find ourselves in, which goes to neurophysiological nervous system regulation. It goes to attending to, which psychedelics are so good at attending to the very subtle fabric of what each of our souls are here to be and do and create and become and respond to, and really opening the aperture of what's calling you and opening that aperture in ceremony. It means making a bigger space for grief and sometimes anger and rage and confusion, which was always there all along, and now might be here in different textures. And then it makes also a space, depending on who I'm sitting with, it makes a space for like opening into a visionary space that also is kind of like tactically grounded in where are the adaptive responses. I think very biologically. So it's like how can we work with this increased capacity for attunement and listening to listen to what is ours to do. And then also some of the other basics are still really present. Like it's always a good thing to bring in gratitude and a good, important door to walk through and refind, reestablish, even when we feel very stressed out. And also to attend to celebration. You know, all of those things become even more of a discipline. It's like I think of it as the discipline of joy. So all of that is present. Um, as a sidebar, I will say I have a very strong ethic that it's not appropriate to do meta crisis education in a psychedelic state. And so one of the doors that I hold in my ceremonies is that people come have a certain level of meta crisis education because it's so deep in what I am and who I am and what I do. And that's part of how I, as a facilitator, navigate the part of a person who wants everything to be okay. For me, there's an invitation to like recognize that things really are as they are. And a ceremony is a safe space to be with that, but it's not a safe space to initiate a person into that.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, there is the choice of using medicine to escape. There's a choice of using medicine to go in and just stay in and do your inner work, which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying none of these are, they all have validity.
Yeah.
But then there's the invitation to go in and find your grounding, find your footing, and then also then come out and say, okay, this is what I have. How do I serve? And again, coming back to that belief system that I'm holding, that we all chose to be here at this time for a reason. And so let me find that reason and then let me show up for that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think psychedelics, when used that way, could be especially powerful and scary. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to do what? I mean, this podcast is one of my answers that I was given in that inquiry.
Yeah.
So, and I, I didn't, took me, there was a lot of resistance and it took me a lot of time to clear the terror out of my own body of coming forward and being this upfront about my psychedelic use and what
Mm.
I've learned and known over
Mm.
the years. And there's more. Being given other things to do and come out and my role to serve. And I'm listening to those and sitting and gathering the resources for those. And I think that's the place where psychedelics can really, really help shift this space we're in. But
I agree.
you have to do your inner work first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So you have said that True Human isn't a book of panic or platitudes. but honestly, do you ever feel despair about where we're
Mm.
headed?
I
And
feel anger. I would
uh,
say yes, I do occasionally feel despair, and I more frequently feel anger and disgust. Like I would say all of those feelings show up for me. I feel all of those feelings, and I feel it in relationship to environmental policy and I feel it in relationship to human rights violations. I feel it in relationship to graft and corruption and the
just
$1.78 billion fund
right
that
out,
was
just
just,
stealing.
right out theft and usury and graft. And I feel it in relationship to people who still feel fidelity to that. I feel it in relationship to people who continue to believe in endless growth imperatives. It's not just around the political world. It's also around just the inability to line up the facts of planetary boundaries being breached with ideologies of limitless growth and freedom as I can do whatever the heck I want all the time, whenever, forever. And that's what inalienable rights mean. It's like so regressive and immature. And then I can remember that, yes, it's regressive and immature. And the only way the immature gets invited forward is for grounded, well-regulated people to create the opportunity for that maturation. And so it's such a constant. I've been really it's like my in my head, my day book these days, if I was writing it down as a day book for other people, it would be these very subtle questions around how this moment is an opportunity for spiritual maturation. And spiritual, not so much in the transcendent sense, though that is also the case, but in the immanent sense of my capacity for relationship, my capacity for communication, and that balance between really caring and caring deeply and specifically and articulating myself bravely and boldly and honestly, and enough dispassion to be able to be unbothered and enough to be able to show up with love, with invitation, with the door to possible development and evolution of perspective. It's quite a dance.
It's quite a dance we are in. I often think of the the etheric realm, the spirits, the ones that we're not seeing, but who are here, holding us, watching us, guiding us. And I often think of their worldview,
Mhm.
because they can see. They can't. I don't know if they can see exactly where we're going, but they have a sense, perhaps, of where we're headed, and whether they're laughing or crying or smacking their heads or going, oh, it's just it's or trying to step out of my own role and into a bigger perspective. And my other way of looking at that is whoever is writing this Netflix series is just totally off the hook. It's like, come on, that would never happen. And then of course
And then it happens. I
it's
mean,
all happening.
that is such a funny talk. I have that talk track where I'm like, if this was a movie, would we believe it? Like, I don't think
No,
we would.
we would walk out and go, well, that would never happen. That's crazy.
Yeah. And yet it's happening, and it's
Every
happening so
day.
fast. It's such, the other thing I really love, I love that you asked that question, and I feel really like it's important to answer it honestly. I also have like so much hope in so many different domains. And additionally, the thing that I become really attentive to is what I call the local news,
Mm.
is like the daily practice of attending to the wind and attending to the birds and attending to the beetles and watering the garden. And of course, we talked about you had gathered friends, and that's true on the human realm. And then it's really true to me on the more than human realm. It's like fundamentally one of the teachings of true human, and this has been woven with different indigenous teachings, but it's very much true to my own realization and practice, is that part of what humans are in charge of in the creation song, like what we are spiritually evolved to do, is to pay attention, the way like Mary Oliver invited us to pay attention and to tell the news. And that if we forget to do that, there's really fundamentally no hope for the rest of it. Because that's how we deepen our relationality with the creation. And in my local universe, there's all kinds of great news. There's more birds this year than there were last year, and there's a lot of good news. And I like to invite people to attend to the local news, both because it's a foundational spiritual responsibility of a human being who is doing a true human thing, but also because it regulates us, and it helps us to deal with all the other things in a way that's much more sane.
That makes total sense. And I try to, our garden is going off. I with intention, fill a portion of my social media feeds with the people who are reporting just good news,
Yes.
just positive things, so that, I'm having a palate, cleanser that's coming through on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You said that weren't so much in despair at times, more anger.
And
I have
disgust.
in disgust, yeah. And I've been sitting with sadness and loss, and
Mhm.
I've been able to find a place to hold that
Mhm.
recently, that feels good, which is,
Mm.
you know, I mean, every civilization has come and gone. We've been able to go back and be like, wow, that must have been a beautiful thing that they created, and it's not here anymore. And now we're creating beautiful things, and beautiful things exist on the planet, and they're not going to stay. So just tending to seeing the beauty, exactly what you're saying, like, wow, this mountain, this building, this community, whatever it is not is it's everything is ephemeral. It's not going to be here forever. I really want to honor it and pay attention to it in this moment, because I can feel that undertone of it's it could be gone really at any point. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm sure the people in Iran are feeling the same thing. They have such, historic treasures,
Yes.
ancient treasures, and
Yes.
and just this worry of like, will things that we care about so much, that we have held and tended all of these centuries, will they be destroyed at any moment? And just sitting with that potential loss, and then balancing it with, let me go to that museum again. Let me see this. Let me be in this moment while I'm still here. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a presence offsetting, a
Mm-hmm.
present attunement to it, offsetting the knowledge of loss of it.
Yeah, it's true. And I think what touches each of us in those losses, I'm so oriented towards, I'm very deeply animist. I'm very deeply environmentalist. I'm very deeply a sacred ecologist. And so I think I tend to orient, I feel those losses and those things extremely acutely. But I hadn't named sadness and loss, but I also feel that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, and for me, it's the animals. It's the animals that get me,
me too.
and you know, our lack of tending, our cruelty, our just dismissing, not thinking. You know, that to me
Mhm.
that's what grabs my heart.
Yeah,
And you know, it's all happen. It's all unfortunately, it's all happening.
it's all happening.
All loss everywhere on all levels. Yay!
I feel, I think that this is one of the places where I struggle with agency is, oh, how can I shift that cruelty? How can I change that? And therefore, I do all the things that I do. I tell the stories I tell. I platform the images and the visions and the things that I platform and make the invitations that I make. One of the root ethical teachings of True Human is that sapience exists to serve sentience. So it's to recognize that the sapience, the human thing, is not doing the human thing and is not wise unless it's actually attending to and caring for the feeling fabric of the animals, of the plants, of the planet itself in a way that is responsive and reciprocal and this time certainly sustainable and regenerative. And I think that's a really confronting statement. It's a very strong statement. Sapiens exists to serve sentience. But it's one that I've been really interested in. One thing I believe in doing in ceremony is bringing in like a single sutra like that as the contemplation, right? There's prayer and then there's contemplation, and to attend to a principle, a way of seeing, and I think we've inherited so many Eastern contemplations, the prayer of like a contemplation on compassion or a contemplation on forgiveness. But I also think it's time to bring in contemplation on sapience, for example. We named ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens. That's ridiculous. Homo wise wise? I don't think so.
We
And what is that? What is that? And so for me, I mean, that phrase came out of a medicine journey, and it really surprised me. And so now I'm instead a student to that phrase. And I feel like that's part of the opportunity is to say, here we are in this time where it is time to ask what makes us most human. And what if we put that in the center of our inquiry, in the center of our contemplation, both with and without medicine, right? In our day
right.
to day,
Yeah.
in our every morning practice.
I think it's a beautiful contemplation, and that's really powerful. And I love that it was given to you in medicine. You give it back to others in the medicine, and that you're continue to sit with it. When you're not in the medicine space, that is it does come to the core of who we are and why we're here. But we didn't get when we came, we didn't get the manual.
Right.
And I think sometimes psychedelics helps to write a manual for write an individual manual for each of us. I think
Mhm.
that
Right,
can
right.
be one of the things that it does.
Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
let's shift a little bit, but we're still staying in the hard. So y'all keep breathing out there. Um, so everywhere we look, patriarchal structures are crumbling, but they're also digging in, they're doubling down. So, what role do you see the divine feminine playing in the reimagining of where we need to go and what we need to create?
Seduction is more compelling than control.
That's a sentence.
I think the feminine sings through beauty, through care, through connectivity, through interdependence, through a sense of deep time that goes back and forward through our wombs. And I think that the feminine has a very, very profound, the feminine could be so many things, but the continuity of life is innately feminine. It's a thing that moves through women's bodies, and it's like there's these transhumanist kind of ideas that we're going to like upload consciousness to a cloud and that's somehow meaningful. It's totally meaningless, utterly and entirely nihilistic from the perspective of the feminine singing of life forward and backwards through time. And so, I think the feminine has a massive role to play, which is the love affair that we have with our own bodies and with the play and the pleasure and the vitality and the creativity of life. And the feminine has a role to play in continuing to tend the right brain, artistic, creative, poetic singing of this life song. Life is nothing without the feminine. I look at the frame I use for the masculine and feminine it's based off of Jungian principles. There's a 4-quadrant map that there's a quiescent masculine and a quiescent feminine and an active masculine and an active feminine. And we've been in an age of really deep imbalance with the active masculine, and the active masculine is still seeking to maintain control and get to the top of a self-created pyramid that's it anyway, but everybody believes in it and everyone's dopamine hijacked to it, and it's really easy to map it and measure it. And then we've also had an imbalance spiritually in terms of masculine spirituality, of like orienting towards the sitting with the pinion of consciousness yoked to itself, which is Shiva, in witness of the creation, right? So the hyper focus that we've had in the last century on more like as a kind of a healing balm for Christianity and for modernity to do Eastern spirituality is also still really imbalanced in terms of bringing us spiritually into the feminine. And the feminine is the yin. It's the the part of us that can grieve, that can metabolize, that can take kind of like deep. It's one of the things that it really is the capacity for a deep metabolic process that births those instructions for life. And then the feminine creative is art and birth and grief and ecstasis. And it's like and if without that, life withers. Life is not life. Right? So it's like, I think we don't know how we're going to get through this, but what we can know is that it won't work without love and celebration and beauty.
And they can try to have AI create love and celebration and beauty, but though that's just not going to work. I mean,
Disembodied love and celebration of beauty is not love and celebration of beauty.
it'll feel like to me, my eyes are super sensitive to cold LED lights.
Mm.
And so it'll be the difference between walking into a warm halogen, room or a fireplace lit room, or everything cold, everything just,
Oh.
and it'll just be like, well, it's all lit the same. I mean, it's all lit up, but it does not feel the same at all.
Yeah. Mm. The perfect metaphor, and one that I am very familiar with.
you are also a person who comes in. It's like, we need to adjust the lighting in this room.
I am.
Something's not quite right.
Could we please?
Especially on psychedelics.
Yes.
All right. Well, you've said it's time to feel the feelings, open the closets, grieve, and forgive.
Hmm.
It's time to turn towards the dark and unresolved places in yourself and in our world and to clean them out. And while that, I agree that that sounds like important, beautiful work for these times, so many people are in deep fear and resistance to feeling their feelings, grieving, forgiving, turning towards the dark places within themselves. So, what would you say to someone listening who hears your call to do that and their response is, yep, nope, nope, tuning out, turning off, not listening to this. I don't
Yeah.
want to do that. Too scary.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I hear you, and that is entirely reasonable and natural response. And the second thing I'd say is there's many different ways of saying this. I love the Anais Nin way of saying it, which is that the day will come when the risk to open as a bud will be more important than the pain that of maintaining the hold. And do you want to choose your aliveness? Because the aliveness lives in meeting at least some of that material, the material that you can meet first, that you can take a step with in a way that is kind to yourself and yet also disciplined in the fact that is a step of maturation. I also will say, relative to that quote, I wrote that quote is probably 3 or 4 years old. It's probably 4 years old. And I have a concept that I've nurtured for a couple decades that I call the great cleanup, the big cleanup. And I think we were much further along in the big cleanup before COVID and before October 17th, and that there have been massive ruptures in the collective psyche that have regressed us significantly collectively. Which now is getting like hyper stressed with AI and job loss and so many acute stressors. So those words have a different gravity in a context where there's a higher level of cohesion and stability socially than they do when there's a higher level of instability. And we're really in a time of increasing and exponentiating instability. So I would also say there's like this really delicate dance of courage and commitment and gentleness and pacing and context creation, that you don't want to do this work alone. We're recovering from the age of do your work alone. You know, it's like do the work together. We are social organisms and we are designed to heal in community. So also like to calibrate that opening with having enough intimacy in your life to hold you in the process.
Oh, I think it's critical to ask for help. I think that's one of the first steps in the process
Yeah.
is to ask for help. And so that concept of I'm going to do this on my own, I'm going to whatever, that's the first block to actually moving through, to be witnessed and held and just guided through the process of your own individual work is the beauty, is the path. And again, more and more, we keep talking about this. Everybody's, alone and this loneliness, etc. To do it in conjunction with someone has such heart resonance, and you'll just go much further on the path if you're traveling with someone else. And I always tell my clients who are in that place of fear and resistance, and they're like, I don't want to look at that. That the, unless you're like just trying to blast it open, which I don't ever encourage anyone to do, that the gentle unfolding of it will not be too much for your nervous system. And with each opening, each looking at the thing that you're trying to, my metaphor is you're trying to hold beach balls underwater. And you can absolutely do that, and you can do it for a long time. but it takes constant vigilance. You got to sit on one, you got to hold one, you got to hold the other. And, and then you're constantly moving and trying to keep it down. And now I don't want that. And then they're going to shoot up, and it's going to be much worse than if you just allow them to gently rise to the surface and just bob along, and you're just working and floating with them. Sometimes they bump into you, but it's so much softer and easier to do it that way, that it's not as scary as they think it's going to be.
It's true. And sometimes the trailhead is right there. Most of the time, the trailhead is right there. And meaning, like, when the thing comes up that you would like to shove under the rug, do the other thing. Just pay attention to what happened and what was triggered, and how that sequence of trigger response happens for you. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, some part of it is just noticing the trailhead and staying with it, which happens all the time. Like, it's not that hard to start doing the work. If you stay with the thing you do that you usually go, okay, and you walk away, just put some attention on it. Why do I do that? Where did that come from? Could I have responded differently at that moment? There's
And not holding it with shame.
exactly.
It's like, oh, I could do better. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. I'll try to do better.
Yep.
Okay. We're going to move. We're still going to do some of the hard things, so you guys can keep breathing out there. But let's turn more with a deeper focus to psychedelics. Many people are hoping that this new rise in popularity and use of these medicines might help to heal the pain on the planet, while also helping us envision new ways out of the mess we're in. And so you founded One Life Circle as a plant medicine ministry. And I'm curious, what does it mean to hold plant medicine within a ministry? What does that container offer that other models don't?
One is explicitly devotional and spiritual. And there's phenomenal work going on with psychedelics and psychotherapy. And that is not so much the orientation that I take. The reason, there's a couple things that a ministry offers. One, it offers legal protection and a very clear statement that this is sacred. This is not the business of the state. This is protected under First Amendment legal rights. And to me, that's a stake in the ground around where I'm coming from. Like, this is my foundational spiritual and religious practice. Whether I think about it as religion or not is my own business. Whether I need other people to think about it or not, that's their business. But that it is explicitly the thing that should not be governed by, that is governed by the rule of divine and natural law. That is, so as a container, that's one thing that it is. Then the kind of work, the orientation of work is devotional. It includes prayer. It includes a very explicit, and a lot of psychotherapy. There's a lot of psychedelic therapists who take a transpersonal view. I also take a transpersonal personal view that it is soul work and that it is work of fabricating our soul into the song of creation. Additionally, I think ministry as a practitioner, the term ministry to me carries an ethical responsibility of care for the world. I take the view that a ceremony isn't a ceremony unless its orientation is to both care for those in the ceremony and care for the world that the ceremony is nested within. If it's not that, I think of it as it could be a ritual or just a circle container. But ceremony to me implies this interpenetration that is oriented towards care of the world. And so ministry to me also implies an invitation into service and care for life. For me, the ministry is not, it's a ministry of care for life. We put life at the center. It's called One Life Circle. And the invitation is to welcome to the One Life Circle, the circle of life to which we all belong, no exceptions. And the orientation of One Life Circle is to tend the intimacy with and belonging to life, because life is what we're doing here. And so we tend that with increased love and increased awareness and the refinements of our relational capacities for communication and self-responsibility and attunement, and the list is long. But we don't put love in the center. We don't put God at the center, although you could say that life and God are somewhat synonymous. But we would say that I'm a panentheist, so I think of God as in and within and co-generating and in the fabric of everything, but also greater than everything. So the kind of geometry of One Life Circle is we put life at the center to attend to what we are doing and what we are, and be in the remembering of that in an orientation that also has a greater divine that we're in relationship to and held by.
Well, just to add on to that, so the mainstream psychedelic conversation is becoming increasingly clinical. So research, clinical trials, outcomes. So what do you think gets lost when we strip ceremony out of medicine work?
Soul, devotion, relationality. I think that clinical work can get very self-focused, which I think can really, done well, it's phenomenally helpful. But it can be very mental. It can be very somewhat narcissistic. It can be, but the magic is stripped out of it. To me, like what makes the whole thing, it's like the very center of the whole point is that we're here co-singing the song of life. And so the clinical tends to break that down because we're focusing on bits rather than wholes. And that's not always the case. And there's brilliant clinicians doing brilliant work. But to me, like the clinical impulse is such an instantiation of modernity. And the deep work is to unravel modernity, is to take ourselves off of the pyramid of human supremacy and put ourselves back in the circle of life that we belong to. I would say I have both a great deal of admiration and care and respect for clinical work, and also a very deep skepticism of it.
Yeah, I both are true, and
Mm-hmm.
I think there's value to it, and they're struggling to figure out a way to put this large amoeba-shaped thing into a very small, narrow hole. And maybe we need to cut off this edge and cut off that edge and shove it in and just make it work. My hope is, of course, that they can get to the other side and then we can reconstitute the full amoeba shape on the other side. But of course, the worry is that it will stay in this small, contained, tight, not fully whole, not fully realized what the real possibility of it is. So, I think we're both holding it with that same care and concern of
Mm-hmm.
what's happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not in charge.
No. No, but
So
but we are in charge of what we do and what we offer, and I think that's also why ministry matters, because I mean it's a different legal context and practice context, and so it creates an alternative doorway for people to grow into.
Right. And this podcast is called Psychedelic Divas, not, in the term of the way people use diva now, where it's like, oh, she's just this fabulous or, whatever, narcissistic woman, but to connect people back to their divinity. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's ceremony built into the name, and the whole reason for this podcast came out of ceremony. It's built around ceremony. It's named after ceremony. This is what I'm teaching and holding and putting out in the world. These are the the people, the women that I'm inviting in to share that perspective. So that's what that's the work that I'm trying to do to counterbalance the shape shifting of the small tightening of this vast, beautiful thing that's being shoved into a very tiny container. Okay, there's so much trauma and dissociation in the world right now. And obviously, those are incredibly challenging energies to hold and work within psychedelic space. So, how do you help people navigate those energies, especially if they aren't even maybe awake to them or in resistance to them?
Breath and embodiment. I think one of the things that a lot of traditional pathways don't have in them is the tools of somatic work. And the somatic work is so important when we're dealing with dissociation and trauma. The slowing down, feeling body, feeling life lifing, which is so fun to do in psychedelic states and so available, whether it's fun or not, it's available. And there's such simple things that happen in day-to-day discourse that then become even more important in that space. It's like the courage to use an I statement and then to actually feel the I statement. So much, to me, so much of the trauma work is about slowing down and allowing one's organism. And, as a facilitator, I'm often facilitating that and modeling it. And you modeled it so beautifully at the very beginning of our conversation. Let's slow down enough that we can feel this at the pace of the body, at a pace where our nervous systems, not just our brains, but our nervous systems can metabolize what we're talking about. That is all the work of trauma work or preemption of trauma. But it's one way or the other, it's in the same spectrum of work. Depending on the acuteness and the breadth of a person's trauma, of course, group work becomes less appropriate. Deep trauma requires deep containment. And so that's also a thing that I attune to with people and with how I work with people, or what container feels appropriate. And I think as a practitioner, it's important to know that we don't know all the things and to do our best to get to know people so that they are held appropriately. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how granular you want to go with it, but it's also important to know histories of mental illness and all of those things to ask. Yeah. I think it's also the other thing that I manage a lot, and I'm sure you manage and others manage, is the expectation that it can all be brought in and all moved quickly. And I think that that's just not the case.
No.
It's like psychedelics create greater neuroplasticity, but the same things apply in psychedelic space as apply in non-psychedelic spaces. The best expectation is small movement at a pace that you can integrate it. And that's the work, And so then it's like, okay, well, great, let's go for small movement that can be integrated. The other thing I often bring in, and this is with anyone, whether they're working with a lot of trauma or not, but particularly people working with a lot of trauma and depression, is that we have this like white picket fence kind of idea about happy. And so what happens is people come with this expectation that it's like this black and white kind of expectation. And in reality, like deep well-being has a deep undramatic okayness that's it's more centered, but it's not always more up. And so that's another expectation that I manage a lot with people, is like this kind of like this black and white kind of expectation that is, from a Jungian perspective, you're trading off on the spectrums. And the invitation is rather to start to find the seat of self-soothing and of like deep attachment to life, attachment to God, if God is part of your construct, that is secure, and where there's like a ground of okayness and regulation and soothing.
So, what do you think plant medicines are asking of us collectively right now? What do you think they want us to understand?
If you're asking the plants and not just all the psychedelics, like they clearly want us to find our place in the planetary ecology. It's very obvious to me. I mean, it depends on the medicine that you ask. If you ask ayahuasca wants you to find your place in, she's the queen of the forest. She's like, how do you fit in the forest in a way that's good for the forest? And if you ask the mushrooms, they're like, well, you better dissolve first and then like have some fun listening. And then if you ask Iboga will say like, be yourself. Get everything else out of the way. And it will show you what's in the way and then say, be yourself. And I mean, those are the ones that I have the most granularity with and that most people have the most access to.
Well, I would say MDMA is like get in your heart, open your heart, unblock your heart,
Yes.
you know, get connected, listen to, don't let your head rule, listen here. I
Hmm.
think LSD is more like, well, keep your connection to the cosmos,
Hmm.
keep your connection to the bigger picture,
Hmm.
and you know, here's the overview, and this
Yes.
is where you fit in, and this is your importance in this overview picture, and now
Yeah.
here's your deployment. Here's your 10 things to, you know,
Right.
get going. Now, these are, this isn't true for every person, every time, every medicine, but it's sort of fun to break them down that way.
Hmm. I take the view that the plants are using us to do what they want us to do. And so if we ask the plants, like, certainly all of them want this creation song, this earth song to continue, and then they direct us differently. It's one of the things I love about ayahuasca so much. She's like, how can I help you tune your instrument in a way that is reciprocal with the creation, with help you sing, help you do your art, help you find your voice, help you find your writing, like all of those things. She's like, how can I help you be more of that feminine seduction frequency that is true to you? It's like, I love that about ayahuasca. I don't sit with ayahuasca very often anymore, but I really love her so much.
That's beautiful. I tend to get, I know that part of ayahuasca, but I also tend to get the stricter grandmother. Yeah, the one that's like, hey,
Do it.
you have been doing, yeah. So, you know, I'm much more careful before I sit with ayahuasca that I've cleaned up my stuff, doing my morning whatever. It's like, okay, I don't need to be lectured. So it's a good practice before showing up. It's
Mhm.
kind of like cleaning your house before your mother comes over.
Mhm. It's great.
So you are an ordained priestess of the 13 moons, and I'm curious how your
Mm.
understanding of the feminine mysteries informs the way you hold ceremony in space.
Oh. And very centrally to me, when I took a vow to the goddess. I'm not a very deistic or theistic person. I'm a very, the way my concept of God, goddess, all that is works is it's very panentheist. It's like, to me, the vow to the goddess is a vow to serve life because life is the goddess to me. Like, there's really no differentiation in in the root philosophies of yoga. It's like the primary difference between Pravriti and Prakriti. Pravriti is the undifferentiated mind, and Prakriti is the manifest universe. And to me, that is the goddess. It's like, it doesn't need to be more deified than that for me. I do pray to Kuan Yin. I do have a statue of Kuan Yin that I feel like she is lensing when her cheeks pink and she breathes of the divine feminine. But what it means to me to be a devotee to the goddess, to be a devotee to the feminine, is to be devoted to the continuity of life. And that's what it meant to me when I took that vow. And I do take it very seriously. That training was with Ariel Spilsbury, who is utterly brilliant archetypally facilitator, and utterly brilliant in terms of the different archetypes of the goddess being lenses for our psychospiritual development and our psychospiritual textures of wisdom, from like levity and crazy wisdom to like deeply refined, the cool, like the warm, cool presence of compassion, or the kind of the very cool and sharp sword of the initiator. So like all of those textures or the kind of like ability to embrace duality with humor that is the wise woman. Like all of these, it's a brilliant, brilliant training that has shaped my life very deeply, from understanding how to build an altar and attend to the energies in an altar, which I think I've been realizing like, oh, I probably need to teach that because people don't know actually how to do that. And I know how to do that really well. And I've had really good teachers, Ariel being one of them. And so it means a lot of things to me.
Well, just to follow up on that, in True Human, you say everything is sacred if you make it so. Sacredness is a choice, sacredness is made real through the act of reverence. So that tending the altar would be that act of reverence. But so tell us now, why would we want to make that choice and just a little bit of how we do it?
Sacred is a concept that was created by the human to describe things that it perceives as sacred. And in Latin, the word sacred means set apart. But in indigenous cosmologies, it's rarely structured. The fabric of the sacred is rarely structured that way in my experience in indigenous tradition practices. It's much more like, well, if you recognize it's sacred, it is sacred. It's like this. And that was also true in like the Greeks' concept of vision was like they were present to the mystery of like, is your eye reaching towards it? Is the thing meeting your eye? Is that both? Is it both? And like the fabric of sacredness is like that. It's like if I say the thing's not sacred, well, then it must be profane and it must be like at a lower level of some kind of interiorly constructed hierarchy. If I say the thing is sacred, then I'm much more likely to care for it, respect it. It is hard to when I really add that up, I'm like, how can I conceive of Trump as sacred? And it's like, well, if I look at who he is on an archetypal level, he's certainly a destroyer, wrathful god, crazy, and there's whole temples devoted to those kinds of gods in Tibet because they're the hard ones to deal with. They're the hard ones to recognize as sacred, to perceive in their teachings. And that's hard practice for me. It's not like it's easy practice, but I think that the way I think about sacredness is that sacredness is a currency that humans are, again, in charge of in the creation, that we either attend to the world as sacred or we relinquish that gesture and we deprive the creation of our perception of it as sacred. And so, I think of consciousness as something that has currency. And so the recognition of the sacred, which could be just appreciation or delight, or you don't have to be like, oh, that thing is sacred. But you might say that thing is beautiful. That thing is touches me in a way that feels vital and alive. John Vervaeke said, sacred is the way the world is to us when we see it through the eyes of love.
That's a
And I
beautiful
think that's
sentence.
a really beautiful definition.
Yeah. So you've been initiated by indigenous teachers across Africa, South America, and the US. So I'm just curious, what do these teachers have to say about the time we're in? And do they have thoughts on the role psychedelics might play?
Oh my goodness. Frankly, none of my indigenous teachers have had much to say about it. That's not true. My Lakota teachers have things to say about it. They have a lot of things to say about it. My Bwiti teachers are busy being Bwiti in the jungle. And I would say my Mazatec teacher, he's very attentive to what's going on, but his orientation is very much around activating the soul and the prayer and the work as a response to what's needed in this time. And my Lakota teachers have been tending prayers for I want to say for centuries, but the teachers who I'm privileged to have in the Lakota and in the Mohawk traditions are generationally people who made it they gathered the teachings from like making it through the schools that pulled everyone out of the culture, and so they're elders who are carrying like the last full bundles that were barely transferred through the Indian schools, and they're working as hard as they can both to share those teachings with the children, keep them tended in community, and then also to tend the deeper prayer that is at the root of American democracy, which is American indigenous democracy, which is the Mohawk, an Iroquois confederacy that was at the roots of the foundation of our country, which is a covenant with nature and with life of interdependence as foundational to our sovereignty and our freedom. And their orientation is to make the prayer to reawaken that memory in this land, which can help awaken it in all of our bodies and our minds. And that prayer, which is a prayer, there's a beautiful book that's about to come out that's a rewrite of, there's a book called The American Roots of the Indian Roots of American Democracy. And there's a republication that's about to come out called The Indigenous Roots of American Democracy. I'll double check and look it up and send it to you for the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it is a work of extraordinary love. It's also for those who are on the psychedelic path. I would say it's a profound thing to study because it's a lens on first principles and protocols that align with natural and divine law and can help us to tend cultures that are less ruptured, right? Intact cultures have all kinds of cultural mechanisms for caring for our relationship with nature, caring for our relationship with intergenerationality, caring for our relationship with the community as a whole. And the teachings there are profound and have far-reaching implications for the future of our country and also for the future of world governance. Very worth bringing into this space. Yeah.
I think that's the perfect segue to my next question was, so in your book, True Human, you introduce the concept of enlightenment. And you tell us what that word means to you. Well, actually, I'm asking you to tell us what that word means to you and why you feel humanity needed a new framework beyond the word enlightenment.
Yeah. I
Why
mean, the way
enlightenment?
enlightenment is the practice of living in life as the gift that it is, living in life as though it is sacred, as though you are home here and you belong here and you are part of this thing that we are experiencing and co-creating. So it rather than taking the view of being in the world but not of it, you take the world that you are in the world and you're of it. And certainly there's a part of consciousness and spirit that can transcend that. And I don't think that's unique to humans. Personally, I've spent enough time with whales and elephants and lions to feel their own transcendence and the way their consciousness bleeds into these bodies and does lion and does whale, to feel that that's an exclusive humans thing. But enlightenment is the practice of living in life as though it is sacred and living here to tend what the Dene, what the Hopi, not the Navajo, the Dene call the beauty way, which is like stitching the beautiful stitches into the fabric of our thread that I've been given as a being in a soul in a body, participating in the fabric of life. And the way that I think of enlightenment is that it's an epochal rooting back into planetary process for each of our individual lives and for our species as a whole. We've been in an arc that I call the age of separation. The age of separation really begins when a species like ours says, I'd like to understand myself separate from the ecology. And then we do all these things that amplify that, like we build structures that separate us from the ecology, and we do agriculture rather than engaging with the ecology. We create our own ecologies to have food, and then we do symbolic currencies, which separates value from the actual thing. And then we do axial gods, which separates God from the creation. And then we do the Enlightenment move where we say rationality, mind is more primary than matter, and rationality is more primary than the complexity that it's embedded within. And all of those things are systems and structures and linguistic frameworks for separation. Then we get to this point in our evolutionary development where we're now. And we're in the great unraveling, and we've created it out of constructs of separation. And so we either move through this, as in Joanna's words, in a great turning and a great remembering. Remembering means to put the members back on the body. It literally means to restitch physical and ontological and metaphorical and energetic and biological, psychological connections and deep meta-relational connectivity. And so the orientation of enlightenment is like, I like the Humpty Dumpty riddle. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty together again. However, if all of the humans, in concert with all of the beings, got really interested in fabricating relational integrity, I bet we could put it back together again. Simply through love and attention and care, and because it's the more adaptive thing to do. So enlightenment is an adaptive, epochal move that simply says, put your attention on relationships as the horizon for your spiritual practice. Relationship in all domains. Relationship with yourself, relationship with your most beloveds who trigger you the most, relationship with all the other humans who trigger you the most, and relationship with with plants, animals, living systems, forces of nature, as like the opportunity for really meaningful participation. Like, I imagine a future where there's a whole class of people who are hydrological experts, whose orientation is to co-sing the coherence of the small and large hydrological cycles of this planet, as an example. But water is a great teacher on this one. One of the teachings in True Human, like in this orientation, we could start to think about how to build technology in a technosphere that is metabolically aligned with planetary health rather than metabolically cancerous to planetary health and necrotic to planetary health, extractive in the extreme, in a very fast forward steroid data center kind of way that sucks. That's not metabolic parity, it's metabolic death. It's like fast forward death engines, but like, no, like that's not the horizon for our evolution. We are enlightened beings, and we're going to ask, how could we align these relationships in a way that is in integrity with each being? There's really simple principles to embody this. Integrity carries reciprocity, mutual benefit, and also carries complementarity that respects diversity and difference as a superpower that makes systems stronger. Super simple. That's from the Kogi and Arhuaco people from Colombia, who didn't want me to name them. They were like, you don't need to name us. But the first time I heard those principles as a trinity was through their teachings. And they play out very, very well in terms of tending fields of relational integrity, whether they're human or more than human, or across human and more than human, and technological, which is really the trinity we have to balance, is like human, natural, tech. Is like, it's all three that we are now at this. It's not about going back, it's about going forward into an ecological civilization, or what I like to call the ecocosm, is a global culture that is grounded in the ecos and attentive to the cosmos, or what Thomas Berry called the ecozoic age.
May it be so, because we certainly need a new path, and it is so beautifully laid out in True Human. All right, last question. Your book's subtitle is Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World. So what's your high dream for what's on the other side of these challenging times?
Oh, I call it the ancient future, or the ecozoic, or the age of communion, or the age of wholeness, or the age of homecoming, which is a really grounded way to say it. Is like, what's on the other side is this incredible opportunity to live in a way that I think we are biophysically and psycho-spiritually designed for, which is to live in this more deeply life-centered, embodied, relational, reciprocal way of aesthetic, way of being human, where we as a species are co-singing the vitality and robustness and biodiversity and health of the well-being of the whole, because because we're a custodial species, and we are a keystone species, and we're the ones who can create or destroy worlds. So we're like, well, let's create world. And not just human. We've realized in this future that just creating the human world is the wrong move. Co-creating world is about partnering with planet to create the continuity of a flourishing biosphere. There is no human flourishing without a flourishing biosphere. That's an irrelevant mental construct that is a fiction. So it's like in the future, we've recognized that we have to participate with the feedback loops of biological, ecological, geophysical integrity and biotechnical, geotechnical integrity in a way that is metabolically harmonious. This is like a really, really hard problem, but the way I'm articulating it are ways we need to start thinking. There's two Substack articles that listeners might be interested in. One is called Towards Planetary Relational Maturity, and the other is called On Relational Maturity. And both of them have like kind of granular principles around this particular conversation. There's also the last chapter in my book focuses on this very specifically around envisioning planetary relational maturity. And of course, that starts with our own relational maturity. It starts with recognizing that we exist in a field of choice-changing causality. All of our actions have downstream and upstream effects. And it's to seek to participate in life in a way that is more nourishing to life.
I think that's a perfect sentence to end on. Samantha, thank you so much for your time and your work in the world and this beautiful book you have gifted us. It's just a guiding light through these dark times. I so appreciate your voice and your dedication to being a steward to the planet and to humankind, because you are definitely needed right now.
Thanks, Carla.
So tell people how they can find you and work with you.
My website is samanthasweetwater.com, and I can be found there. I do private work, I do ceremonial work, and then I also do coaching work that is not necessarily driven by psychedelics. And primarily I work with people who really want to be on team victory for the earth and refining their contribution to that and their unique gifts in contribution to that. And the book is available pretty much everywhere you buy books, and you don't need to go to Amazon. You can go bookshop.org if you want to. And I love hearing what stands out to people about the book. So if people grab the book, and the book is a really good day book. It's a really good bibliomancy book. You can open it anywhere and find nuggets. Very effective that way. Even for me, I've been really surprised by it. And it's really a delight, Carla. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, my total pleasure. And I want to thank you all for listening. Even though Instagram keeps trying to kick me off the platform, I am doubling down and I am focusing on growing my presence and voice there. So please consider following us at Psychedelic Divas. And if you're not on Instagram, I would just love it if you would follow my YouTube channel at Carla Detchen. These are the little things that make my day a little brighter. So if you enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking the 5 stars right now, wherever you're listening. And you can follow Samantha as well on Instagram. I follow her and find it quite valuable. Are you at Samantha Sweetwater?
I'm at Enlightenment.
At Enlightenment. Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Thank you all so much for being on this growth journey together with me. And thank you again, Samantha. All right, y'all. Continue taking those deep breaths for the day, and I will see you on the next episode.